Kindness, when given without permission or reward, often carries a louder echo than war itself. Let us know in the comment section below what you think this quote means and how far a simple act of kindness can reach. Josephine Cabrera didn't flinch when the wrench slipped and her knuckles cracked against the underside of the Mustang's hood. Pain was familiar, expected, like the faint ache that lingered in her jaw every time she smiled too long. She hissed, wiped the grease off on her jeans, and kept working. The early morning light filtering through the garage bay doors behind Rosie's diner. She wasn't supposed to be back there, not officially, but Rosie had stopped caring about that 6 months ago when she caught Josephine slipping out the side door in the dead of night, wiping oil from her palms and blinking back tears. She had let her stay. Told her the diner had seen enough ghosts and might as well make room for one more. Josephine was 27, too young to be bitter and too old to still be stuck in a town with 2 traffic lights and a single high school that still used chalkboards. Her Mustang had belonged to her dad, Army issue, metallic red, half rusted and half legend, depending on who told the story. He died in a place no one could pronounce, a sand pit in the middle of nothing, where letters stopped coming and the Army sent men in pressed uniforms instead. The car had sat untouched until Josephine started tearing it apart with more rage than plan. She wiped her forearm across her forehead and glanced at the clock through the break room window. 7:12 AME, time to wash up, slap on the apron, and pour burnt coffee for the local ranchers. Josephine wasn't beautiful in a way that turned heads. She was magnetic in a way that made people wonder what they missed after they'd already looked away. Sharp eyes, quiet hands. She moved like someone who never expected to be asked what she was thinking. Rosie caught her as she slipped inside. "Gonna finish that car before the heat death of the universe?" The older woman smirked, arms crossed over her chest. "Maybe," Josephine said, sliding the apron over her head and tying it behind her back. "Gotta do something with my hands or I'll start smashing dishes." "You'd better not. We're down to 4 salad plates and one's already chipped." The bell over the diner door jingled. Josephine turned automatically, her smile halfway up. It was him again. The boy, he couldn't have been older than 10, 11 maybe. Corduroy jacket that didn't quite fit, a backpack too big for his shoulders. Same routine every morning for the last 2 weeks. Walk in just after 7, sit at the same corner booth, order water, and pull out a beat-up copy of the Red Badge of Courage. He never asked for food. He never made a mess. He never said a word. She watched as he slid into his seat, pulling the book open like it was armor. Josephine grabbed a glass, filled it with ice water, and walked over. "Here you go," she said gently. He nodded without looking up. She lingered for a second longer than necessary. "You waiting for someone?" "No," he said. Not unkindly, just flat. "Okay," she said, stepping back. "You let me know if you need anything." She walked away, but something stayed, a prickle in the back of her mind. Something about the way he curled his hands in his lap, like he was trying to make himself smaller. Josephine had seen a lot of quiet kids, but this one wasn't quiet because of shyness. Jason was waiting. By the end of her shift, he was gone again. No sound, no goodbye. Just an empty glass and a faint smudge on the window where his breath had fogged the glass. The next morning he came back, and Josephine had made up her mind. She poured him a glass of water as usual, but this time she added a plate of toast and scrambled eggs, sent it down like it was just another order. He looked up, confused. "I didn't—" "It's on the house," she said before he could finish. He stared at the plate, then at her. Josephine met his gaze and saw something flicker there, a quiet tension, like he didn't know whether to eat or run. "You allergic to anything?" she asked. He shook his head. "Good," she said, and walked away. He ate, slowly, carefully, like someone expecting the food to be snatched away halfway through. By the time she checked on him again, the plate was wiped clean. That night, Josephine didn't go to the garage. She sat on the hood of the Mustang, her back against the windshield, and looked up at the stars. Didn't make sense, really. A kid with no name, no parents, no reason to be there. But she couldn't shake the feeling she knew the story. Maybe not the details, but the shape of it. Kids like that didn't wander in unless something was broken, and Josephine Cabrera knew what broken looked like. By the third morning, she added bacon. The kid blinked. "You don't have to keep—" "I know," she said. "Eat." He did. This time he didn't. A rancher named Otis made a joke at the counter about her starting a soup kitchen. She didn't laugh. "Let the kid eat in peace," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The place went quiet for a beat too long. Then Rosie clattered some mugs, and everyone went back to pretending not to notice. But Josephine noticed. So did the boy. That afternoon, after her shift, she walked to the Mustang and found something tucked beneath the wiper blade. A torn scrap of notebook paper, folded neatly. No envelope, no name. She opened it. One sentence, printed in careful block letters. "Thank you for not asking questions." Josephine didn't cry often, didn't believe in crying for things that had already passed. But she folded that note and slipped it in the glove box. Didn't say a word. The next morning was the diner didn't open until 8. She got there at 6:30 anyway. Something in her chest kept her from sleeping. By 7:05, the boy still hadn't come. By 7:15, Josephine stepped outside, scanning the empty road. By 7:19, she heard them. Iguanas. She turned. Army jeeps. 3 of them, creeping down the gravel road like they were hunting something. Josephine's stomach dropped. Not because they were there, but because she realized the boy wasn't coming, and someone had found him first. Josephine didn't go back inside right away. The army jeeps hadn't even parked before the questions started digging their claws into her. She stayed still, framed in the soft morning haze, apron wrinkled and stained with coffee, grease under her nails from last night's work under the hood. She had no idea what protocol was when uniformed men pulled into a civilian lot at 7 in the morning, but she did know they didn't just roll up to small-town diners for pancakes and black coffee. 3 jeeps, 2 uniformed drivers each, clean, official, not local. The doors opened in unison. That's when she saw the man get out of the lead vehicle. Not young, maybe early 50s, regulation haircut, pressed fatigues, the kind of posture you never shake after decades of service. His boots hit the gravel with the sound of authority. Not thunder, not violence. Something quieter, more final. He walked toward her without hesitation. Josephine didn't move. "You, Josephine Cabrera?" Her voice worked, but only just. "Yeah." The man nodded. "I'm Colonel Jacob Morales, U.S. Army, 3rd Sustainment Command. May I speak with you privately?" She hesitated, eyes scanning the other soldiers now fanning out along the property line like they were performing a security sweep. "Why?" The colonel glanced toward the window of the diner, then back to her. "You've had a visitor, a young boy, several times. We'd like to talk about him." Josephine's throat tightened. "Lucas," she said before she could stop herself. "His name's Lucas." The colonel gave the barest nod. "I can't confirm anything yet, Miss Cabrera, but we believe you may have interacted with someone under our care, someone important." "I fed him breakfast," she said slowly. "He never asked, just sat there, reading." "Did he say anything to you? Anything at all? About his father, where he came from?" "No." She folded her arms, partly from habit, partly from how exposed she felt. "He barely talked. I just noticed." The colonel exhaled. It wasn't a sigh of frustration. It was something quieter, sadder. "He was never supposed to be here," he said softly. "He was being transported to a relative in Colorado after a family casualty notification. We think he slipped away at a stop near the border." "Slipped away?" Her voice cracked. "He's a kid." "Smart one," Morelli said. "A scared one." Josephine looked past the colonel toward the empty booth inside. The book was still there, left behind. The red badge of courage. Face down, cover bent at the spine. "Is he okay?" The colonel hesitated. That second of silence stretched far too long. "He's been located," he said finally. "That's all I can confirm." "You're not saying he's safe?" Morales didn't respond. "Is he hurt?" "Still nothing." Her hands curled into fists, fingers catching the edge of her apron. "I don't care if you're the Army or the Pope," she snapped, voice rising. "You rolled up in government vehicles and scared the hell out of my customers. I deserve to know, was that boy hurt?" Morales met her eyes. His face, trained to be unreadable, faltered for the briefest moment. "No," he said. "Not physically." Josephine swallowed. The colonel reached into his coat and handed her a sealed envelope. Thick, heavier than a regular letter. No markings, just her name written in small, careful handwriting. She recognized it instantly. "Lucas?" "She left this with someone in our chain of custody," Morales said. "Said it was for you." Josephine didn't move. The envelope felt radioactive in her hands, like something sacred. Morales stepped back, giving her space. "Mistrusted you a lot," he added. "I didn't do anything," she murmured. The colonel's face softened. "That's where you're wrong." He turned and walked back toward the lead jeep, leaving her standing alone in the gravel. Josephine didn't open the letter right away. She sat in her car, not the Mustang, her clunker of a Civic she used to get to and from shifts. The envelope rested in her lap as the world moved around her. A waitress she barely knew passed by, staring out the window, coffee pot forgotten in one hand. The parking lot emptied slowly. Curious onlookers filtered out of the diner, whispering and wondering what the hell just happened. Rosie appeared a minute later, leaning into the driver's window. "You good?" Josephine looked at her and saw concern flickering just under Rosie's usual iron exterior. "I think so. Want the rest of the day off?" Josephine shook her head. "I need to work." Rosie nodded and walked away without pushing. Josephine tore the envelope open only after the lunch rush started. She slipped into the back pantry, door cracked just wide enough to let in a strip of light, and pulled out the letter. The paper was lined, torn from a spiral notebook. The handwriting was tight, deliberate. No misspellings, no wasted space. "Miss Josephine, thank you for not asking questions. Most grown-ups ask too many, or they say things with their eyes. You didn't. You didn't look at me like I was lost, and you just let me sit. My dad used to say people who fix engines don't need to talk much, because engines only break when something inside them gets stuck. I think people are like that. Something gets stuck and they stop working right. You helped me unstick something, even if you didn't mean to. I left the book on purpose. You should keep it. Thank you for the food, but mostly thank you for not needing to know everything. Lucas Bay. Josephine folded the letter like it was glass. She put it in the pocket of her apron and didn't speak for the rest of her shift unless someone needed refills. That night she didn't go home. She opened the Mustang's hood, sat on a folding chair, and just stared at the engine. Her father used to say, "Engines don't care how you feel, but if you treat them right, they'll carry you out of anywhere." She thought about Lucas, about how you can disappear even in plain sight, and about the boy who just wanted someone not to ask. The engine gleamed under the moonlight, half fixed, half forgotten, but tonight she didn't touch it. She just sat and listened. The silence, for once, didn't feel empty. It felt like waiting, like the beginning of something. The next few days passed like they were dipped in syrup, slow, sweet, and just sticky enough to keep Josephine off balance. Lucas didn't come back. That part she understood. She told herself not to expect him. The Army had him now. Wherever he was, it was out of her hands. And yet, she checked the booth every morning anyway. The book stayed on her kitchen counter, unopened. She couldn't bring herself to read it. Not yet. Every time her hand hovered over the cover, she felt something twist behind her ribs, like opening it would mean saying goodbye, and she wasn't ready for that. Not when every corner of the diner still felt like it held echoes of him. His quiet nods, the way he held his spoon like it might betray him. She worked longer hours even when Rosie told her not to. She mopped until her arms ached, scrubbed grease off the kitchen tiles that had been there since before she was born, anything to keep from sitting still. Because the moment she did, the silence got too loud. The moment she did, her mind went straight to Lucas. Where he was, who had him, what would happen next. On Friday, 4 days after the Jeeps rolled in and changed everything, she was closing up when she saw it. A man she didn't recognize was standing at the edge of the lot, hands in the pockets of a dark brown jacket. He wasn't watching the road or the sunset. He was watching her. Josephine froze. He didn't wave. Didn't move. She stepped out from the diner door, slowly, letting it swing shut behind her. "You lost?" she called. The man took one step forward. "I'm looking for Josephine Cabrera." His voice wasn't threatening. Calm, even. She kept the distance between them. "You found her?" He gave a small nod. "I'm not Army, but I work with them. Sometimes." That didn't ease the knot tightening in her gut. He reached into his jacket slowly, too slowly, and pulled out a small ID wallet. Flashed it open. Not long enough for her to catch a name, but the emblem looked real. He tucked it back in. "I was asked to check in on you." She blinked. "Why?" "Because a boy wrote about you," he said, "and when certain people read that letter they realized you might have done more for him than anyone else had in weeks." Josephine shifted her weight, arms crossed. "So you're here to thank me?" "I'm here to ask if you'd like to know the rest." She didn't answer right away. He waited, patient, like a man used to standing guard. Finally, she spoke. "I thought I wasn't supposed to know. You weren't, but things changed." She stepped down off the curb, moving closer. "Changed how?" Lucas ran. "Twice." The bottom dropped out of her stomach. "He's okay," the man added quickly. "Physically. But he keeps asking for you." Josephine's throat went dry. "I'm not family," she said. "I'm not even a teacher or a counselor. I'm just someone who fed him eggs." The man smiled faintly. "Sometimes that's enough." They stood there in silence for a moment. Then Josephine took a breath. "Where is he now?" "Temporary foster placement, classified, but they've got a unit nearby, an outreach program for surviving military dependents. He's one of the youngest they've ever had." She didn't know what to say to that. The man reached into his coat again, slower this time, and pulled out another envelope. Smaller. "New. He wrote this yesterday," he said. "Said if we ever saw you, we should pass it along." Josephine took it with both hands. The man turned to go. "What's your name?" she called after him. He paused, glanced back. "Ben," he said. "Doesn't matter much. But you mattered to him." He was gone a second later, swallowed up by the night like he'd never been there at all. Josephine stood in the empty lot, envelope clutched against her chest, unsure whether to open it or run. She opened it. This one was shorter, no lined paper, just a single note card, folded once. "You remembered my name. That's more than some people ever do." "Lucas?" Josephine didn't cry. Not then. She just stood still. Let the quiet wrap around her. Felt the whole world shrink down to that boy's name written in blocky, determined ink. She thought about how many kids fell through the cracks like that. How many never got to say thank you or goodbye. That night, she didn't go home. She drove miles out past the edge of town, past the fields and broken fence posts where the stars came down low enough to touch. She pulled off into a dirt clearing, killed the headlights, and got out. The Mustang still wasn't running. Not yet. But she knew now why she kept fixing it. It wasn't just a tribute to her father. It was a way out, not for her, for someone, maybe for the next kid, maybe for the next broken piece of something no one else wanted to hold. The diner would still be there. The grease, the coffee, the half-cooked dreams of 100 locals who never left. But Josephine Cabrera, she had a name now, too. To someone out there, she was more than just a waitress. She was the girl who didn't ask questions, the one who made eggs without permission, the one who remembered. She got back in her Civic, engine ticking in the cool air, and stared up at the sky. She whispered his name like a prayer, a hope, and when she turned the key in the ignition, the car roared to life like it was answering back. She drove home. Tomorrow she would go back to the Mustang. Finish the job. Because sometimes kindness wasn't about mending people. It was about building the road for when they came back. The sun had barely broken past the horizon when Josephine pushed the garage bay door open and stood beneath the frame, coffee in hand and a wrench tucked into her back pocket like a trusted friend. The Mustang's hood gleamed faintly, a mixture of old paint and fresh effort. She'd scrubbed every inch of it the night before, after the letter, after the long drive, after everything felt too heavy to carry without doing something about it. This time she wasn't working from anger or grief. She was working from purpose. She dropped her coffee onto the workbench and tied her hair back, clicked on the light above the engine bay. The garage filled with the familiar hum of fluorescent flicker. By 9 a.m. she was elbows deep in it, her father's old toolbox opened like a treasure chest beside her, spark plugs replaced, timing belt aligned, distributor cap double-checked, battery recharged. The alternator had been stubborn last week. Not today. Today it hummed under her touch, like even the car knew something had shifted. Rosie peeked in around 10:15, balancing a plate with eggs and bacon on one hand and a Diet Coke in the other. "You eat today?" she asked without looking directly at Josephine. "Not yet." "You will now." Rosie set the plate down on a nearby crate and leaned against the doorway. "Haven't seen you work this hard since the day I found you crying in the grease pan, pretending to be fixing the brakes." Josephine snorted. "They needed fixing." "Sure," Rosie smirked. "So did your heart." Josephine wiped her hands on a rag and turned toward the older woman. "You ever feel like you're supposed to fix something before you even know what it is?" "All the time," Rosie said. "That's how I ended up running a diner instead of flying to Paris. Some things you pick, some things pick you." The two women stood in companionable silence for a few beats. Then Josephine asked without turning her head, "What happens when the thing you're fixing is a person?" Rosie pushed off the door frame. "You fix what you can, and you don't wait for thanks, because maybe just being fixed enough to keep going is the only thank you they can give." Josephine nodded. Then she looked at the keys sitting on the workbench. As they were her father's, same dull brass ring, same army dog-tag chain looped through the ignition key. She picked them up, slid into the driver's seat, turned the key. The engine coughed once, an old man waking from sleep, then roared to life like it had never stopped breathing. The vibration ran through the chassis and up her spine, filling her chest with something she hadn't felt in years. She laughed, loud and clear, a sound that shocked even her. Rosie clapped once, grinning. "Well, hell, I was almost starting to bet against you." Josephine turned the car off and stepped out, hands trembling slightly. "I'm not done." Rosie arched an eyebrow. "That sounded done to me." "Janine, I'm not done with what I started." The older woman gave a knowing nod, softening. "You going to find him?" "I'm not sure if that's the right move," Josephine admitted. "But I know I can't sit here pretending nothing happened." Rosie walked back into the diner without another word, but when Josephine followed her 5 minutes later, there was an envelope on the counter with a phone number inside, a name written beneath it in careful block print. Eleanor Marks, Military Family Services, Region 12. There was no note. Rosie didn't need to explain. Josephine called the number on her lunch break. By that evening, she had a meeting scheduled in Tulsa. 3 days later, she took the Mustang out onto the open road for the first time in 10 years. The windows rattled, the tires squealed a little, but the engine held. It didn't just hold, it carried her. She arrived at a squat brick building that smelled like old paint and paperwork. Inside, a woman with soft eyes and a clipboard led her to a conference room where she waited exactly 14 minutes before the door cracked open and a boy stepped in. His hair was slightly shorter, his jacket newer, his shoes were untied. Lucas didn't say anything at first. Neither did Josephine, and slowly he pulled out a book from under his arm. Not the red badge of courage this time. The journal. He placed it on the table between them. "I write now," he said. She smiled. "I'm glad. They said I could see you once, just once. I picked today." Josephine felt something rise in her throat. "Isn't sure if you'd want to," she said. He looked at her, eyes steady in that way kids carry when they've seen too much, and survived it anyway. "I didn't forget your name." She reached across the table, not to touch him, but to set something down beside his journal. "A single key?" "The Mustang spare." He stared at it. "I can't drive." "You will," she said softly. "Someday." He looked back up at her. "Why me?" "Because you reminded me why I was still here," she said. "I didn't mean to." "I know." The room went quiet again. Then he asked, "Are you going to come back?" Josephine smiled. "How about this? You write, I'll write back, and when you're ready to visit, there'll be a plate of eggs and a booth with your name on it." Lucas nodded. He tucked the key into his pocket. When the meeting time was up, they stood. He didn't hug her. She didn't expect him to. But as he turned to go, he paused. "Thank you for not asking me to be okay." She blinked back, something sharp in her eyes. "You don't have to be. Not all at once." He nodded again and left. She stood in that conference room until the light outside dimmed. A month later, she got a letter in the mail with a return address that just said, Lucas B. Inside was a drawing. It was the Mustang, parked outside Rosie's diner. 2 stick figures on the hood, one with a ponytail, the other small with wild lines for hair and untied shoes. There were no words, just that picture. She pinned it to the wall of the garage just above the workbench. Then she picked up a wrench. There was always something else to fix. But for now, the engine had turned over, and that was enough.